Thanks for coming to the session. My name's Igor Juricevic. It's a bit of a weird name, and the accent kind of don't match. So I'm a South African, you can probably pick up from my accent, of Croatian heritage, but I've just recently immigrated from the UK. So I spent 10 years in the United Kingdom and about a year and a half here in Australia, so I'm still kind of understanding the lay of the land here. All right, so I've been with K2. So K2 is a technology company sort of working quite closely with Microsoft for about 13 years. I started out actually at Microsoft's Thames Valley Park in the United Kingdom. I don't know if anyone ever been to the headquarters in, do you know where that is? Huh? Yeah, it's a beautiful campus there at Microsoft in Reading. Anyway, so I spent about 2 years there working on, am I good, sound? Everyone? Yeah. Spent about 2 years working out there. Anyway, so I'm quite nervous, so just forgive me for a little bit of jittery, and hopefully it'll warm up a little bit. What I'm going to do today is show you a piece of technology in which you can use inside of your SharePoint environment, inside of your Office 365 environment, inside of your Dynamics CRM environments, or inside of a standalone environment even, and integrate in all those systems together. So it's around integration and being able to build business applications quite quickly. So I'm not much of a PowerPoint person, so what I'm going to do is just a few slides, but I think I've got 3 or 4 slides to show you. Effectively, what you need to do when you create business applications, there's a few aspects that you need. You need to have forms so that people interact with. You need to, behind those forms quite often, when somebody does something, is start processes. So workflow processes that span across your organization. You want to be able to monitor what's going on in those, so from a reporting point of view. And then you want to be able to integrate with your line of business data that you already have. So data isn't always just in one place. People like to service data from many different environments and be able to utilize it. And without that, the forms are pretty dumb, if they don't have that rich data inside of them. Okay, so I'm going to take you through, it's going to be mostly demo. So what I'm going to do is take you through a bit of an end user scenario first of all, just to show you a demo. And then we're going to go together and we're going to go and build some of those, some of the screens that I demonstrated. So we'll go and see a little bit of the build. And then if internet behaves, maybe I'll get you guys to contribute and interact with it as well. All right. So inside of the demo, and this is the guys moaned at me about this ugly picture that I put together here just to highlight it. What the scenario is going to look at is a bit of a hybrid in the cloud and on-premise. All right. So a lot of organizations might start using Office 365 in a hybrid scenario, maybe still have some on-premise stuff, and then want to start using Office 365. And then we even have some organizations that want to have an Office 365 environment for certain people to working, which is separated from other environments. So think about a scenario where you have contractors, or you have even other organizations that you want to incorporate with some of your data into some of your processes, but they might be, have their own logins and their own authentication providers and that. All right. So in my scenario, what we've got is sort of on-premise over here. What we've got is on an on-premise environment, we're going to have a bunch of users that interact using Active Directory. And they work inside of things like SharePoint and CRM, and we've got some on-premise SQL Server databases. All right? And these could even be in Azure. It doesn't really matter where they are. So effectively, our users are going to have customers that are sitting inside of Dynamics CRM. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into SharePoint and we're going to create projects for those customers. So we're going to use SharePoint in a kind of collaborative way, but pulling data from Dynamics CRM so that we're using it now inside of our SharePoint environment. And we're creating a project for a specific customer. Then what we want to do is we want to allow, inside of Office 365, our contractors logging in through Azure AD with their credentials into an Office 365 environment, and then exposing that data into that environment so that they can then go and allocate a cost to one of those projects. So they're effectively logging into Azure and Office 365, going into their portal, clicking on create a project, and inside there, they can now choose the projects and that information that is coming in from this environment, which is live coming in from that environment. And from there as well, connect to other services and be able to fill in forms that are very kind of data-rich forms. And once they do that, we want them to then be able to go and kick off a process that spans across your Office 365 environment and all these other systems. So a business process that's interacting with multiple different people that are logging in using different logins. So you might have people logging in using LinkedIn, for example, people logging in using Azure, and people that sit on premise that don't know anything about that and just want to go and do their work and get the notifications and do the things that they need to do. Right, so it's quite a lot of stuff going on here, a lot of moving parts, so fingers crossed everything behaves. Does that scenario make sense to everyone? All right, maybe I made it a bit too complicated, I don't know. All right, so how this all sort of fits together is that from a K2 world, so we spoke a little bit about having those forms, workflows, and reporting. The thing with data is that it's probably all over the place, right? So over here, we've got some data sitting inside of SharePoint in my example. We've got some data sitting inside of probably some web servers, SQL Server, maybe some CRM stuff. And it could be anything. You could have anyone work with SAP. So think about data inside of SAP, and now your users are able to interact with that data. So SAP data, maybe connecting to some of the Azure OData services, using some of that information. So that stuff is, there's just a wealth of information and data out there that you could use. All right. So before I go and explain this, I just want to get a way of hands. My nerves kind of made me forget to do this. So I want to get an idea in the room. Who's heard of K2 before? Wow, okay. That's I probably could leave now. It's almost everyone. All right. So who in the room is a developer? Okay, a system admin. Okay. All right. Business. Okay. All right. A bit of a mix. Okay, fantastic. Okay. All right. So let's get back to here. So we talk about our workflow forms and reports, and that we talk about that data. Now, what you don't do with K2 is kind of start to connect it up like that. So you don't go and say, all right, we've got a workflow process. I've got to connect it to OData and I connect it to a web service and start to kind of drag and drop that onto your workflow. And then you have a form, and then you sort of start dragging and dropping or whatever it is to connect that form to those systems. Because effectively, what you find that you get into a bit of a model where this becomes pretty technical, and whoever's working on this needs to know a lot about what's going on over here. So you need to know that's maybe to connect to this AD here, that's an LDAP query, and to SQL, it's a SQL statement, or what's the name of the database, or how do I connect, what's the security, what sort of permission, there's all that sort of stuff. When I'm connecting to SAP, you need to understand, am I using OData, or am I using a BAPI, or an RFC connection, or, what I mean, there's a lot of kind of technical jargon that goes into that. So with K2, we have a technology that we fit into the middle here called the K2 Smart Objects. And effectively, what you're able to do is model out smart objects and then build your workflows, your forms, your processes against these smart objects. And behind the objects, you can connect them up to the various different backend systems. You can actually start building without connecting. You can actually start prototyping, building. So quite often when I work with the business, we sort of start building, start creating a bit of an entity, build the forms, get a bit of an overview of what's going on. And then once they leave, for half a day workshop, we then start to connect it up to the systems. And at least, there's a much closer relationship between the sort of business and IT of the expectation of what they're going to get delivered. All right. So the purpose of that is to keep us a lot more business problem focused on that end and more kind of IT focused in that direction. Make sense to everyone? Okay. From a techie point of view, these smart objects are pretty cool. So you have a smart object, you can use them in K2. The smart objects themselves expose themselves as a number of different mechanisms. So you can connect to them using REST. You can connect to them using .NET APIs, web services, ADO.NET. You could do a query, select star from department where clients equals so-and-so, and it'll actually go and do that sort of thing for you. Remember, the data's coming from various different backends. All right. So they're quite useful, not only in the K2 kind of forms and workflow, but you can start to use those services that are created elsewhere as well. Okay. Right. Okay, questions and answers? We're finished? So anyway, that's pretty much all the PowerPoint we're going to do today. All right. So let's start off. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of some stuff that's on premise. So I'm just going to introduce you into the components that we got here. So first of all, I've got this is a CRM system, a non-premise CRM system. And inside here, I've got a number of different accounts. So you can see I've got a bunch of accounts. For example, here's one called Microsoft. If I open up Microsoft, here's some details about Microsoft. I can see where they are. I can see the contacts. I've got Joanne, Nancy, and Jones inside here. So this is just an example of one of our back-end systems, CRM, and with a bunch of accounts inside of there. All right. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my on-premise SharePoint environment. And inside here, we need to set up a project for a specific customer. So inside of my customer projects, I say, let's add a new project inside here. I didn't actually think of an example. So let's say it's the Ignite conference is a project that we need to do for Microsoft, right? So let's say Ignite conference. So I go here to customer, and if I go and type in MIC, that's found Microsoft. It's a project that's in process, and I'm going to give that a budget. Let's give it a budget of, how much do you think they spent here? $1 million. All right, and I'm going to save that. So inside of our SharePoint environment, I've created a little Ignite conference for Microsoft and added that inside there. What you didn't realize is while I was adding that, I actually used the K2 Smart Form inside of that SharePoint environment to add that data. So when I said new, there was a K2 Smart Form that loaded up. So the purpose of me telling you that afterwards is that it should be kind of seamless to the end user that's interacting. They had no idea that when they hit new item that it was a K2 form that they filled in. Because on that K2 form, I was able to find Microsoft out of my CRM system. And that's how I've added that into that list. Make sense? Okay, so that's the first thing. So we've got a CRM account called Microsoft, and now we've created a project for that account inside of our SharePoint environment. So what we're going to do now is, and you'll notice that for the total cost, there's nothing at the moment. So there's no total cost that are allocated to that. So this is our on-premise users interacting, setting up this project, and now our contractors are going to log in into a separate environment to go and interact with this data. Okay. So if I go down to the bottom there, let's go into Azure, into Office 365, right? So sitting inside of my Office 365 environment, I've got a little area here called Project Expenditure. So you can see I've logged in here, and in this environment here, I've logged in with completely different credentials. So I've logged in with Administrator at K2 Australia. It's totally different to the other credentials I was logged in as. And what I'm going to do inside here is go New Item. Right, so what that's doing is bringing up a form that I now need to fill in around allocating a cost to that project. So the conference, I guess they needed to get, what's an item they probably had to spend money on? The venue. So maybe an item in the venue, maybe the catering, or I want to spell catering, so I'll give it a go. Catering, did I get it right? All right. So catering, so I go to customer. So you'll notice now this is a drop-down list box of my CRM customers. So I'm going to choose Microsoft. And what that's done is that's now brought me a drop-down list box, and there's Ignite Conference inside there. So that was the one that we just added a few minutes ago. So I'm going to choose Ignite Conference, choose the date. So what I'm also going to do here, let's do the date over here. I'm going to go also put an amount. So for the catering, that's going to cost us, let's say, 8,000, right? So I go and choose a currency because we're bringing this stuff from all over the place. So I'm going to go and say that was actually 8,000 euros. So I'll choose euros. Okay. So 8,000 euros. So it's converted that back to Australian dollars. So we can see that's 10,022.40 Australian dollars. And I'm going to go and specify the approver for this is going to be Igor. So I've chosen Igor. It's pulled up my mobile number and set status of new. So, and I'll just put a little description in here saying we're getting the food from, where did we buy that food from? From Paris, just to support what's going on there. Okay, never mind. All right, so So that's our little form sitting inside of Office 365. So that's actually a K2 Smart form sitting inside there. So the end user, clicked on there, opened up the form, and they filled in the information. So if you think about this form is actually pulling in, there's quite a lot of information that's coming and being surfaced in this form. Again, we've got our list of Dynamics CRM customers. And when I'm choosing a customer, we are then using a cascading dropdown to load the customer projects out of the SharePoint list, right? And then pulling that in. Then the currencies that I'm allowed to choose are coming out of a SQL database, right? And then when I'm choosing a currency, we're then calling another service to go and do the currency conversion to do that calculation for us. Not one line of code has been written behind this form. And we're going to build this form together, and I'll show you how we're going to put this together. Does it make sense to everyone? It's sort of the richness of what's going on inside here? Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is go and save that. All right? So I hit save. Gives me a chance to have some water. The internet. Here we go. So we can see there's catering now saved into that SharePoint list. And you'll see there it says new at the moment. So now this is where I sweat a little bit and refresh this view. And I see it says now in process. All right. So what's happened there is by hitting the save, it's actually started a workflow process. Now I've added the process inside here so we can go and have a look at it. So track my process. There's a catering process over there. Let's go and have a look at that. And this is bringing up the workflow that's running behind the scenes. Okay. So what's happened is the process has started. It's got some information. It's gone to this project expense approval. Someone needs to approve it. If you remember, I typed my name inside there. So if I go and have a look at that, that's actually sitting with me for approval. So it's a little workflow process that's now started. Okay, so just to keep everyone on track, that was in Azure, some other people logging in, filling in a form, hitting save, starting a process, all right, in a completely separate environment. Now what's happened here, so if I go back onto my on-premise environment, make sure I'm in the right one, yeah, Igor. Go back into my SharePoint environment over here. Just going to go to my portal. If I go and look at my task list, what you can see is I've got a task to approve that catering expense that's taken place. So we're back now at the internal users that are, they set up a project and now they're starting to see, there's some costs that are coming in. And it's been kicked off to the correct project. There's no typo mistakes that somebody allocated to the incorrect one, or they had to type in what project and they had to phone in and ask. They had the right data, they filled in the form, gave them everything, gave the contractors everything they needed to kick off the correct process with the correct data, and now the approver has the task sitting inside of their task list. Okay. So I can open up this task from inside here, or do lots of things like approve or decline it from my task list, open up the form, do a number of things. But unfortunately, I'm out of the office. So I'm going to be, traveling, and I want to be able to look at these things as well. So the next part of my demo that makes me sweat a little bit is the displaying the mobile device. I've seen a lot of people struggle with this over the last few days. All right. So here I've logged into I'm on my mobile. I'm just going to go to my email. Thank God it's there. And there's an email that's arrived. I open that up. So here's a little email. I didn't really make it that pretty. But what it's saying is, hi Igor, for catering for the Ignite conference for the customer project with a current budget of $1 million, there's a project that's come in here for me to approve. So I can decide if I can approve that or decline it from my phone. So I could just reply with the word approved, and that'll continue the process. Or I can go and click on the link. And what that does is it takes me to the form that's been created for that particular step in the workflow, in which I can now go and have a look at that, the detail behind that, and then make a decision on it. So I'm sitting on my mobile device now. I can see here catering Microsoft, the Ignite conference, and the amount was 8,000 euros, which was that 12,000 Australian dollars. Remember, that's that data that's actually coming now from Office 365, from that list inside of Office 365. From here, I can go and have a look at the project details. And I can see there, Microsoft Ignite, the budget's $1 million, and it's currently a project in process. Okay, that's great. Let me go and have a look at the customer. So I go to customer details over here. And I can see that's for Microsoft Sydney, Australia. And I've also noticed that the state that I've got inside here says QLD. So Sydney, Queensland, it's probably incorrect. So if I go into, well, that's running, maybe I can tab into it. Let's go back here, all right? So if you notice, inside of my CRM system, you can see there's an issue here. It's actually showing Queensland as the state, so that's incorrect. So I'm just going to go back to the screen over here. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to go here and say, well, that's actually incorrect. Let's make that New South Wales. Not New South Wales, all right? And I hit the update button, okay? So let's go back into my CRM system. Just refresh that screen. And New South Wales. And that's updated. So obviously you probably don't want to do that with every form. You probably want, when the person hits update, it kicks off another process for somebody to review. So-and-so during this process picked up, once you change this field, do you approve it? If you want to control that. But in my case, I'm allowed to update that data. My security context gets passed through. If I'm not allowed to do it inside of CRM, it won't let me anyway. And I've updated and I've fixed it. So I've done a bit of data cleansing while I'm busy dealing with something else. So let's go back to that form again. So if you think about it, on my mobile device now, I'm looking at data from Office 365, from the on-premise SharePoint list, and from my dynamic CRM system. And at the end of the day, that user doesn't really care where that data is coming from. They just want to see the information to help them make a decision, review that information, and then go and make that decision. So what I'm going to do is just scroll down to the bottom here and decide my action that I'm going to do on it. So I'm going to approve that expense, submit that off, and let's go back down to our workflow process. So what should happen is that we should see which way the workflow ends up going based upon the decision that I just made. Let's also send me a text notification letting me know that that approval's taken place as well. Yeah, there we go. So that's gone through. The last little step was this little text message that came through my smartwatch. Yeah. So that process, starting off from inside of Azure, kind of flowing through, updating a few little systems along the way, and hopefully giving you a little bit of an example of kind of an end-to-end process, an end-to-end business process, but out of the bounds of any particular system, but integrated into many. Does that make sense? So the idea behind that is, if I'm a user and I live and breathe inside of SharePoint, I don't go anywhere else. I see I've got a task, or I've got something to do, I open it up, I do what I need to do, carry on with what I'm doing. You've got somebody who maybe lives and breathes inside of Dynamic CRM. They receive their task inside of CRM. They do what they need to do and continue, yet they're all part of the same business process. You can even have business processes crossing, people talk, can you have a process that crosses multiple SharePoint sites? Hell, we're crossing multiple SharePoint farms here, actually completely different ones. We're crossing Office 365 through to on-premise and a number of different systems here. Right, so does that give you a bit of a sort of scope of the kind of process you can put in place? It's more of a business process across your organization rather than just kind of processes inside of any particular app. Of course, you can build those simple little things as well, but you can really go outside and span across your organization. Make sense? All right. So you want to go and build the form and see what it's like to actually go and create some of this? Okay. All right, great. So what we're going to do now is go and build it. So I've got another little list here called Project Expenditure Build, I've called it. Don't know why that's taking long now. There we go. So nerve-wracking waiting for these little things to load. Anyway, so this is just a standard SharePoint list. There's nothing fancy going on inside here. It's just got a couple columns, title, customer, project, and a bunch of fields that are sitting inside here. I've got one here called ref as well. I want to show you, I'll add a little bit of custom code into this to do something to create a reference number. All right. And if I click on the new item button over here, did I click on it? There we go. So that's the standard SharePoint list. Okay, everyone familiar? Nothing. So this is not integrated with K2 at all at this point in time. Okay. So what we're going to do now is go and turn this thing into the that form that we had a look at a little bit earlier. Maybe even make it a little bit more fun as well. So let's go back to this picture now. Right. So what I'm going to do is, if I go and build this right now with these smart objects already existing, I'll probably build that in about 10 minutes, and I'll have that form up and ready and created. But what I want to do is take it a step back and go and create some of these smart objects for you. So I've got a SQL Server database that's vanilla. I want to go and show you how I can expose that, a web service, and go and create some of these smart objects, get them ready, so that when I build a form, I can then just start to use them. Okay? So we're going to focus on the kind of IT focus side of things first, and then we're going to go down and then do the kind of business problem focus stuff of utilizing and using those components. All right? Make sense? Okay. All right, so let's go and start to create some of them. All right, so for the currency, we're going to use a SQL Server database. For when we choose a currency and convert it to Australian dollars, we're going to use a web service. To create the reference, I'm going to use some custom code. So we're going to go and create smart objects out of all of those that become reusable components that we can then use when we build these types of forms. Okay? So let's go into my environment over here. I don't think I need that anymore. And I don't think I need that anymore. All right. Actually, I'm going to go in as my admin here. All right, so inside of here, there's a few things I've got. So first of all, I've created just a little database here called Ignite. And inside of Ignite, I've got one little table called Ignite Currency. So if I just have a look at the design, it's really basic, just a ID and a value that sits inside there. Maybe I can even do a description. Don't go making changes, Igor. Varchar 50. All right. So, don't know why I do that to myself. Anyways, so if I go now and edit the top 200 rows, wasn't that? There we go. All right, so I don't know what I'm going to put in the description here now, but UK money, US dollars is world money, Australian. Falling fast. Canadian? What? Funny money. Funny money. Okay. All right, and I'll add a new one inside here. ZAR. SAFA. SAFA money. Okay. All right. So just a database with a bunch of stuff inside of it. I'm off my plot here a little bit of what I was planning on doing, but anyway. Okay. So we've got a database, and honestly, it's sitting here in a SQL Server database. It could be an Oracle data. It could be a database, SQL Azure. It doesn't really matter. All right. What we're going to now do is I want to create there's two things I need to create. The first thing I need to do, and back to this picture again. The first thing, so we've got the database now. Where is it? Over here. Got the database. And what we want to do first is generate one of those lines. So the line is called a service object, and it's a thing that allows us to communicate with that data, that data source. And then from there, we can then generate smart objects out of it. So we could create multiple smart objects out of that same data, depending on its use case. So you might want ones that are authenticated and different security. There's a whole bunch of mechanisms, or you might just want one. So we're going to go and do that first step, okay? So let's go and have some fun here. So we've got our database. So I'm opening up one of the KD toolings. So you'll see there, and I know it's pretty small on the screen there, that says service objects and that says smart objects. So that's the line, and the smart object is a smart object. So we're going to go to the service object. I'm going to open that up. These are all the systems that I can connect to. Most of them are the out-of-the-box systems that we can connect to. So what are we going to do is go down to one over here called SQL Server. All right, and I'm going to go and say, I want to generate a new service instance out of some SQL Server data. All right. So a couple of things it's going to ask me, first of all, is how am I going to connect to that back-end data source? All right. So there's a few options, and you can actually extend these yourself as well. Everything in K2 is extendable from a .NET, and so devs can really kind of extend the platform quite a lot. So I'm going to connect to that database using either a service account, impersonation, so that'll obviously take whoever's hitting my form or whatever it is and then pass their credentials, and then the database is going to say, nope, get out of here, or it's going to allow them. Or I'm going to connect with a single sign-on. So things like maybe SAP, for example, might have its own usernames and passwords, and then you want to map your AD or your Azure username to, and be able to do something along those lines. Or you want to use things like OAuth and be able to pass and use a bit of OAuth across the different systems. Of course, they need to support it. Okay, so there's a few options that I've got here about how I'm going to connect. So in my case, I'm just going to use a service account because I'm going to actually do something else with that data a little bit later. So the database name is Ignite, and we go next, and I'm going to call that my Ignite database. Add. So let's go down. There it is, Ignite. So it's found the stored procedures, tables, and views. If I go to my tables, there's Ignite currency. It's found it. It's found all the properties. It's found the sort of methods that I can do against that. All right. So that's just the line. And what we're going to do now is create a smart object out of that. So I'm just going to right-click on it, say create a smart object. This time I'm going to tidy it up now because I want this smart object to be kind of more friendly for somebody who's focused on the business side of using it. So I don't want to, tidy it up a little bit. So I'm going to call this Ignite currency, and you can even rename some of these properties. So the guys that interact with SAP, sometimes the things are in German. Maybe put the English name for it or whatever it is. So I want those methods, and even inside here, I can start to remove some of the CRUD methods. So I can say only expose the list in the update, for example, in this smart object. Make sense? All right. I'm going to put that into a folder here that I've got called Ignite and publish that. So let's publish it. So if I go now into one of my toolings that I can go and have a look at my environment from a web-based designer point of view. Inside of here, we've got Ignite, and we've got Ignite currency as a smart object. And we can go and do things with it. All right? Okay. So let's go and now, so that's one smart object we now have, which we can use a bit later. Now let's go and do the other ones. Okay, so the next one that we're going to do, I've got a little cheat sheet over here. So we did the SQL database. The next one we're going to do is a web service. So I've just got a little web service over here. I'll drop that in there. So it's a little basic web service. It's got a method here called getCurrencyByDate. And you can see that takes in a from to, there we go, a from to an amount and a date. Make sense? So that's a web service I'd like to take advantage of. Okay. So let's go and take this web service, and let's go and generate a smart object now out of that web service. So you'll see a pattern emerging here that it becomes very similar. So I'm going to go now to my web service broker. And there we go, endpoint web service. Let's register a service instance. So similar to like I did with the SQL database. How are we going to connect to it? I'm going to use a service account as well. The web service URL. So you'll notice the questions here are now around web services, whereas before they were around databases. So that changes based upon the system you're connecting to. Okay, so that's the one I'm going to use. Next, and we're going to now give that a name. So I'm going to call this Ignite currency converter. Add. So K2 discovers the web service just like it did the SQL database. There it is there. It's found the service, the services that are available. The one I want is this getCurrencyByDate. Let's create a smart object of it. I'm hoping you're seeing it's very similar to how we did a little bit earlier again. So let's tidy it up again. So let's call this Ignite getCurrency. I'll just leave it like that. Let's get rid of the rest. Okay, Ignite getCurrency. And let's put that also into that little Ignite folder. And then this time it's got a method here called read. It doesn't really make sense if it's converting currency. Why don't we just call it convert? Let's call it convert like that. And then it brings back a double. Well, let's call this, instead of double, let's call this converted value to make it a little bit more interesting to understand, and publish that as a smart object. All right. So going back here again, if I refresh that, we've got two smart objects here now. We've got an ignite currency, and I get oops, did I call it ignite currency? Yeah, I did. Oh, sorry, get currency. Thanks. See what happens when you're up here. Anyway, so we've got our ignite currencies. I should have probably said that. And then this is our ignite get currency. The ones from a SQL Server database, the other ones are web service. All right? Make sense? Okay. Then the other thing I want to do now is there's something I wanted to do that's not out of the box. K2 doesn't have out of the box, and I actually want to use my .NET skills now and be able to do something. All right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this bit of code. I know it's very basic, but just to illustrate the point. What this code does is it takes in a string, it loops through the string, finds any spaces, and just uses the first letter of every word. So if it's Igor Juricevic, it would be IJ. Does that make sense? So just a bit of code, and I just want to show you how you can add some code to this as well. So let's copy this code. And what we're going to do is open up some Visual Studio over here. Probably need to upgrade my Visual Studio environment. And let's go new project. Let's do a class library. Let's call this ignite code. All right. All right, so that's a little class for the developers. Just going to paste that code inside here. Maybe rename this class as ignite code as well. And I mean, what you'll notice inside here is nothing to do with K2. This is just, brand new class, a bit of code that I've put inside here. And of course, you can, you've got the .NET framework here to do things and reference assemblies and, do what you need to do from a, code point of view. All right, so let's build that. Okay, build succeeded. And now what I'm going to do is go and get the location of the assembly. Ignite code. So there's my DLL. Just going to take that DLL. Home, copy. All right. So let's go now create a service object out of that code. So I'll go back into our little tool over here. This time I'm going to endpoint assembly over here. Register service instance, pattern again. Service account, the assembly DLL, location, there it is. Next. So this is going to be our ignite, what is it, first letter or something like that. So it's just what my code does, it gets the first letters. I should have changed the resolution a bit. Okay. So once again, if I find it in my little list here, ignite first letters. There it is. Get first letter is the method that was available there. Let's create that as a smart object. Let's put that into ignite. Ignite get first letters. And I'm going to call this one do it. Your reference, whatever. Okay? Publish. Okay, so let's go and have a look again. All right. You're with me at the moment? So we're just creating those services. So I've got ones already now for the Dynamics CRM and the SharePoint. I won't go through all the others. But we're now going to go and consume those and use those now inside of Office 365. Okay? All right. So let's have a look. Where are we? Yeah. Okay. So back to this picture. We are now going to focus on this side of the picture. Okay. So we did the technical sort of side, exposed a bunch of smart objects, specified the security around them, and now we're going to go and use them. All right. So the first thing I want to do is take this SharePoint list, and I actually want to turn it into a K2 smart form. All right. So inside of here, I've got a little K2 application button. And what you do is you install the K2 app into your SharePoint environment, and it gives you this, and you set your security, and there's a bit of OAuth setup, and there's a few trust little things that you click on, but it practically does everything for you. I say, okay, let's go to that K2 application. I click on the button, and then it says to me, what do I want to do with this SharePoint list? Have I already built an application, maybe in another environment, and I want to deploy it into this environment, or do I want to build one new from this environment? So we're going to create a new one. So we're going to create a new application. So the first thing it says is we need a smart object. So you'll notice it's already ticked. What's going to happen here, the first thing is going to happen is it's going to, all the stuff that we did a little bit earlier, just by ticking that button and saying, okay, it'll go and create that smart object, the service, the whole thing, it'll do all of that for me automatically. So that is one thing we need, because we need that smart object against that SharePoint list. But then I also want to have a form that's created for this. So I tick with a form, and I could tick workflow and report as well. But we'll focus on the form stuff today. So, okay. And K2 is now generating the service instance like we did a little bit earlier. It's creating the smart object on top of that, and it is going to go and then build views and forms. How K2 works from a forms point of view is that it creates our forms. When you build a form in K2, you actually don't go and build a form. What you do is you build your views, and then you take your form, you create a form, and you put the views on a form. So you don't build a form. You build a view and then put it on the form. The reason for that is to promote reusability and the way K2 is architected. So if you think about a scenario where you might have, think of HR. You need to build lots of HR forms. And on HR forms, almost every HR form is going to have employee details on the top of the form. So what you can do is you can build employee details as a view. And now when you need to build the leave request form, you take your leave request form, you put employee details on the form, and then you add the leave details onto that. Now when I build an expense claim, I just drop employee details onto it. And then 800 forms later, you realize that on employee details, you need to capture or show, or maybe not show the date of birth because people are finding that sensitive. You go and update that view, remove that, or hide it, or add a rule of when it should be hidden. And then those 800 forms pick up that change. And so from a maintenance point of view, does that make sense? Okay. All right, so what we've done is we've just generated a whole bunch of artifacts. We've generated the views and the forms automatically. So let's go back into SharePoint and have a look what's happened here. I'm just going to open it up in another tab. So go to our project build over here again. And this time when I say new item, this form, when it loads, this form is now a K2 form, no longer a SharePoint form. All right? And what the form is made up of, so it's automatically replaced that SharePoint form now with the K2 form that's been generated. This whole thing is a form, and it's comprised of two views. So we've got a top view over here, which is the item view, and in SharePoint, a list can have attachments. So it's added a little attachments view as well. All right. So it's a form with two views. Make sense? So what we're going to do is we're going to go and edit this form, and then go and add all the sort of customer project and bring in all that information that we want to interact with. Okay. So let's go into the designer now. So this is actually K2. So we're still in the context of Office 365, but this is now the K2 designer here. We're going to go into the new project expenditure build view. So that's that top section. We're going to check that out. And we're going to go and edit that. All right, so that's that view that we were looking at a little bit earlier. Now let's go and do a few things on it. So customer, let's turn that into a drop-down list. Okay, so drop-down list. Where does it get its data from? So I'm going to go and choose a smart object. So you get your data from a smart object. You'll see there's my Ignite stuff with the fields we had a little bit earlier. But in this case, I'm going to go to my SharePoint. Now you'll notice in my environment, I'm actually connected to quite a few different SharePoint environments here. So these are different ones that I could actually go and interact with any of those at this point in time. The one I'm going to interact with here is one called my static one, where I've specified static credentials to it. Custom project simple. So I've actually created two smart objects against that customer projects. Sorry, not customer projects. I need to get my customers. So, excuse me. Because we're getting our customers. I'm being too premature. I'm already going for the projects. So let's go to our line of business system over here. So where is it? There we go. So line of business. Let's go and get our customers from our CRM system. Inside of our CRM system, we've got some account summary. Let's get that. I want to store the account name in SharePoint. and I'm going to display the account name, but I also want to display account name dash the city that account is in the drop-down. So it's a drop-down with the name and the city. Make sense? So let's bring that in, and okay. All right. So I'm going to save that and just go and show you what we've done so I'm just going to refresh this form now inside of SharePoint. What you'll notice, the whole form is locked while it loads. I know it's still pretty quick. And I've now got a list of those customers that are sitting inside there, including Microsoft Sydney that we had a little bit earlier. All right. So that's already me connecting to a smart object and pulling that information through. All right. One thing I didn't like is the fact that it locked the whole form while it was loading that data, because maybe the SAP system's slow or a backend system is a little bit slow, and I don't want the user kind of waiting 20 seconds for all this data to kind of be populated. So one change I'm going to make on that is I'm going to go to my rules, to the initialize of this view, and what you'll notice is it's already written some rules for me, and one of the rules it's written is populate the customer drop-down list with data. All right, just because I bound it, and it's done that for me. But then I can come to this and I can say, you know what, do this asynchronously. All right? So it's going to now asynchronously populate that drop-down list. So let's save that. This time when I load up this form, look at the customer, just too quick. So the form loaded up, but if this list here was slower, you'd actually see a little spinner inside there. So effectively, while I'm still typing in the title, that might take me 5 seconds, my data is busy loading. So it's, I can actually get on with what I'm doing. As long as I don't put the customer as the first one, just put it as a second or third one down. Does that make sense? So it's just a little bit of asynchronous loading of that data taking place. The next thing we want to do is on a form is that when I choose a customer over here, I want it to go and list the projects for that customer using a cascading drop-down. All right? But if you think this is a cascading drop-down across 2 different systems that we're going to do here. Okay? So let's go back to here. Let's go and choose the customer projects. I'm going to make that a drop-down list as well. I'm going to go to the smart objects. And this time around, I'm going to go to my SharePoint environment, to smart object that's been generated there, customer project simple. So you can generate multiple smart objects against the same data. So for example, when I let it do it automatically against, let's say, Dynamics CRM or against SharePoint, it's got the modified by, it's got all the extra metadata that goes along with that item. And in some cases, yes, you want that, but for my example over here, I just care about the projects. So I've then created another smart object, kind of simplified one for whoever I want to consume these and take advantage of them. So I've created one here called Customer Project Simple. What that just brings me back is the title, customer name, budget, and total cost. So what I'm going to show is I want to show the title, display the title. Maybe I'll even just display the title dash the budget, not the budget, the status of that project. So make sure I'm choosing projects that are currently in process. And then I'm going to filter the data. This is the cascading drop-down part. I'm going to filter this data from another control. So I'm going to choose the customer drop-down based upon the customer name. Make sense? And okay. So let's have a look at that. If I refresh this form again. So our form's loaded up. I'm going to go and choose Microsoft down at the bottom here. That's now loaded. And there is Ignite Conference in process as the project that we had a look at. All right, so that's now bringing that bit of data into it. The next thing we're going to do is go and bring in our SQL Server data and our code and a bunch of other things. So for the currency, let's go and choose another well, let's not do a drop down. Let's do a radio button list. Okay, so we're going to do a radio button list. So my radio button list data is going to come from, and now you'll notice the sort of pattern that's taking place. So I'm going to go to my Ignite, to my Ignite currency. Let's use that one. Let's store the actual currency itself. Let's show the currency and let's show the description of that currency in my little drop down. Okay, let's do that. So that's going to now show that information. Let's add let's add a rule to this now, that when I actually click on a currency, we now want to go and do that conversion, right? So we're going to add a rule to this and say Okay, well, when the currency has changed, right, then I can do some conditions. So, and you'll see there's words like subform and subview, and so you could pop things up, ask someone a question, then later on check what they said earlier to work into our rule. That sort of stuff can come into it. The question that we're going to, the thing that we're going to check first of all is make sure that they've actually put an amount in the text box. So as long as they've chosen an amount, then what we're going to do is go and call a smart object. The smart object we're going to go and call is called our get currency. So the one that we exposed a little bit earlier from the web service. You'll see that it says convert. Remember we renamed that. And then there are the inputs. Remember that from the web service. Okay. So we're going to be converting from the, anyone see my drop-down list? Currency radio button list. There we go. So I'm going to go to the currency radio button list. I can access the backend data around that. And I'm going to go and get that currency as the from. We're converting to Australian dollars. The amount is going to be the amount text box. The date, we could even go and use the date on the form, or in this case, I'm going to go and get the system's date, get the current date and time. Let's use that. Then when I say next, it says, well, it brings me back a double. I guess I didn't save that. So let's go and take that and put that into the amount in Australian dollars over there. Right, so that's the return value that comes back. So finish, and OK. And then I'm going to go to that amount in Australian dollars and maybe make that a read-only field, because now it's converted the currency there. All right? And then the last thing we're going to do on this particular one is I want to generate this reference based upon the customer and the project, and just the first letters. Remember using that little tool, that code. So what I'll do here is I can go and add now a, where should we do it? Maybe I can do it on the save button, or when you tab into this. Let's do it as a little independent rule. So let's add a rule called generate reference. Okay, so generate reference. What that's going to do is going to call a smart object. It's going to go to ignite. It's going to ignite get first letters. Remember that was our custom code. I'm going to call that. It says execute the do it method. It needs to take in a string, and the string that I'm going to pass in there is going to be the customer drop-down list box, the project drop-down list box, something like that. All right? And then the return value, we're going to take that and put into the reference. Okay. So what I've done is I've added a unbound rule. So that's a rule, kind of like almost like a subroutine, if you know what I mean, in little subclass. Now I can choose where does that actually get called. So I can go and say, well, let's do it with once you've actually chosen a project. So we've got those rule. We're going to add a little rule inside here that when you've chosen a project, so when that has happened, what I want you to do is go and execute the generate reference rule. So I could call it now from a few places, that bit of code. Okay? And what else can we do here? Is it making sense so far? There's quite a bit of stuff going on inside here. All right. So let's say that I want to get carried away and do something with mobiles and send text messages and stuff, but we'll get to that maybe a bit later. All right, so let's go and finish that. And let's go and check that in now. All right. Okay, let's go back to our little form. All right, so title, I'll just call it new one. So customer, Microsoft Sydney, Ignite conference. So that is now, you see the reference, MIC. So if I were to go now and choose new boardroom, MNB, and you'll notice it's a lot quicker the first time around. It was a little bit slow because it's just loading it into memory the first time, and now it's busy calling. So it's kind of cool if you think about it. We're kind of calling custom code inside of our Office 365 environment. Okay, so we're doing that. We're choosing a date here, just filling in a few things, a couple values. There's the SAFA money. That's going to be embarrassing how much this is going to be. It's going to be like, yeah, it's like 10 times now, my God. And a bunch of information. I hit the save button, and then that's going to go and save that into that SharePoint list. Okay, so there's the new one added inside there with the reference and all those different systems and data and SQL database, all that sort of stuff coming together inside that Office 365 list. So the next thing I want to do though is say, okay, that's great. So we've got that, and these users are busy using it. But maybe what I want to do is now start to let other people interact with this form that we built here on a mobile device. I'm going to have to go and build another form. All right. So what can we do with that? All right, so is the internet working for you guys? It's not saturated? Because I know everyone's checking their mail and browsing the internet, and it's all good? Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go to that form that I built, that we've got. So let's go in here and edit this form. Let's check it out. This is the new project build form. I'm going to edit it. Now, I've still got a bit of time, and I want to show you what I think is one of the most powerful parts of K2 is the reusability of stuff. Right? I mean, those smart objects we generated, we do that once, and now we could reuse them many times, right? But you can also build views and then reuse them, and you can put a lot of capability behind a view. So one of the things I want to do is when you are in Office 365 and you choose a customer, what I'd also like to do is bring in more of that customer data, so that you know which customer and who are the contacts for that customer, and bring in more of that information into this environment, all right? So what we're going to do is make a modification to our form. So I don't care about the attachments in this demo, so I'm just going to remove that. I don't want to clutter this form too much, so I'm going to add some tabs into it. Add another little tab here called client details. All right. And then I'm going to go into here, I'm going to type in CRM. And here I've got a view called CRM account detail summary, which I'm going to drop onto the screen here. So this is a little view that's been built before. It was actually one of the views I used in the previous demo to show me where I did the little update back into CRM. So I'm going to drop that onto the screen. And now I need to add some rules to how this new view that we've added interacts with our form. So it's sitting on the form here. Now listen to the logic we're going to write. We're going to say, when the customer drop-down changes on this view, I want you then to initialize the CRM view. Does it make sense? Okay. So we're going to write that rule now. So on my rules, we've got when the customer drop-down has changed. So this rule is actually already there for us. It was the rule that got created when we did the cascading drop-down. Right? So it's actually written that. We never wrote this, but K2 generated it for us. Now I can intercept that rule from the form. So for example, I could go here now and do that, which means the cascading drop-down is not going to work now on this particular form, but it'll work on any other form. All right? Let's enable that again, because I want it to work. So at this point in time, we're going to say, okay, so when the customer drop-down list box has changed, go to my CRM view and tell it to initialize. And my CRM view, when I built it, I put some property parameters into it. You can either pass me the dynamic CRM GUID, and it'll know to load it, or you can pass in the actual account name, and it'll try and look it up. And if it finds it, then it'll load it. Sometimes you don't know the GUID of your account, right? So we're lucky in our case is that I can now go to the view that we built earlier, go to the controls, go to the customer drop-down list box. I can still hit the backend smart object, get the ID, and I'll pass that inside there. And that's it. I'm just going to hit finish. And that's all I'm going to do. All right, so save. So now this time around, let's go into new item again in SharePoint. I'm in Office 365. So now it loads up like this. There's my client details, nothing going on here. Let's go and choose our account, our customer. So I say Microsoft again. Now when I go to client details, there's that data from the CRM system, including the New South Wales information we had there. Click on contacts. There's Joanne, Nancy, and Peter are the contacts for that particular CRM customer. Imagine if that was your SAP data that we've just now brought into this environment. So, and that's really beautiful, is that you can create a view. The first time I created this view, actually, it kind of only had the data. Then I added the update button later. Then I added the kind of contacts, and all the previous applications that I built that utilized that got enriched as well, and suddenly they had more and more capabilities. So that sort of brought that little view into it. Okay, now let's take this form outside and get it onto a mobile device. So I'm just going to check it in. And I'm going to save as. So I'm just going to make a duplicate of this form. I'm just going to call it ext. right? And you'll notice it says clone the views, and I've got no. So effectively, what I'm doing is I'm duplicating the form, but using the same views. So if I were to make a change to one of the views now, both these forms pick it up. So I'm not maintaining two forms anymore. I've still got two forms, but they're using the same views and same kind of capability inside there. All right? So let's go to this external one. Let's edit that. And let's add some other things to it. All right? So the first thing I'm going to do is change the theme that we're going to use. So at the moment, it's using this sort of SharePoint theme. Let's use a theme called Lithium. What I'm also going to do is add a little bit of a header. I've got a little Ignite header view that I created a little bit earlier. It's not the prettiest one I've ever done, I'll be honest. So let's make that non-collapsible. So that's a little header that's going on. Let's go also onto this form, and let's go to the advanced options. First of all, I actually want to make this 800 pixels wide. Go to advanced, and I can switch on anonymous access. Sorry. So I'm going to switch on anonymous access onto this form, all right? And you can also do things like offline capability so that people can fill this thing in an offline. So imagine like you're down in a mine and you're doing a review on something, that sort of stuff. And you can even get it to cache the data. But that's a whole nother, come and see me at the booth, we can talk about that sort of stuff. There's a whole sort of information around that. Okay, so anonymous access on this form. One of the things that also happens is this view's got the save button that came with it that was already on the view. But on this form, I want the save to behave differently than it does on any of the other forms. So the view has got a save, and what that save does is it says to the user, thanks, you've completed, and it redirects him back into the Office 365 list. But if I'm exposing this externally, anonymously, I don't want them to go back to that Office 365 list because I don't have access to it. It's going to ask them for them to log in. I want just something else to happen. Right. So on this form, I can now go and intercept the save button, go to the rules behind that, and then make changes to it that won't affect any of the other forms, but just this one. All right? So the change I'm going to make is tell it to go and not redirect to a SharePoint message, but to my external message that I've got over here. And maybe what we can also do is before it does that, what I'll do is let's show a message as well. Let's say show a message. It's a little info message. Let's make it maybe a medium size. Thanks for watching. Something like that. And then I can still, you'll notice, interact with all the sort of data to build up this message a little bit nicer than that. Okay? So that little thanks for watching message. I think that's all I want. Okay. And finish. Thinking have I done everything? I think I have. Check that in. Now let's run that. So run it. So there's our form now sitting outside of that Office 365 environment, but with all the information ready for us to interact with. So I'm going to take this form now, and I'm going to use a little form that I built. So this is another K2 form that I created that generates a tiny URL for me. So take that tiny URL, and you can hit that form with your mobile, or if you want, either using the tiny URL there, send a text message to me. So if you can send a text message to this number with the word add, and then your text will arrive over here, and then I'll be able to send that all to you guys. So please participate if you can. There we go. I should have made it automatically just send it, but I did it in a bit of a batch. So what's actually quite interesting here is you guys are sending your text messages. Text messages are starting a K2 process, and what the process does is it looks at the word you've written, and depending on the word, it then adds it into a list, into a SharePoint list. And I have all the text messages that are coming in, and then when I hit the send button, it then starts a workflow process that loops through each item in this list and sends you back a text message of whatever's written in the top over there. Make sense? So just an interesting little technical process that does kind of a for each type scenario of the messages. Okay? All right. Okay, so I think I've got a few in there. Hopefully some of you guys have sent. Yeah, I've got a few. So I'm going to now go and say send to waiting mobiles. And I'm hoping I'm going to vibrations and noises and this is coming in. You guys getting the messages? Coming through? All right. Okay, this should start emptying these out. There we go. Okay, so everyone's got their message. All right. Hit the form all at once, so we can bring down the. Let me know if your form is loaded. I know the internet's a bit. It's loaded up. Okay, excellent. Does it look different to this form? So you'll see that's a responsive kind of UI that's taking place. So for those of you who haven't got mobiles on you, I'll text myself as well. All right, and let's go back to here. So that's what the form looks like then on the mobile device. And of course, go ahead, go choose a customer, maybe Microsoft or any other ones, and then go to the customer details, and then you should see the details. And what you should also notice is that your update button should be disabled. So I've got a rule on my view that's saying if I don't know who you are, then disable this, or and that's the sort of stuff that you can start to build into it. So that should be now, kind of on your form. Now, if you can as well, just go and fill in maybe some of the details, have a little bit of a play, and hit the save button. And then we should see what happens with that data. Okay, so you've saved some of it? Okay. Anyone else hit save yet? Okay, so let's go and have a look. So if I go now back into my SharePoint environment here, let's go back to our project build. There we go. Thanks, guys. Interesting icons. So hopefully you recognize some of those. Those are the data. It's awesome to see you guys participate like that. Jeez, it makes me feel a lot better. So that's then the data coming back in again. So I know I'm probably almost up. I think we've got like 5 minutes left. But hopefully it's given you a good insight to seeing a little bit of the sort of stuff that you can build with K2. I mean, there's a lot more capability. The workflow processes can get a lot more insane than just a little workflow process like that. But I guess I should ask, any questions up until this point? Has it made sense to everyone? It's the sort of things that you can do? Great. Well, thanks for watching the demo. Any other questions? Anyone got any questions?
What version are you up to, K2? Like, how long have you guys been doing this for?
Well, I've been with K2 13 years, so version 2. The integration stuff, probably at least 8 years since I've been with K2, we've had the smart object capability. 8, 9 years probably even. The smart forms capability is probably about 3 years old. Probably about 3 years old. So we're on version 4.6.11. I'm actually on 4.6.9. I haven't upgraded my environment yet. So I'm probably not supposed to say that. Yeah, so we're on 4.6.11, so 4.6.11, and I guess it's quite a few versions. We don't do any major changes to it anymore. So there's no like version 5 and it's complete. You now have to leave what you've done there, and you know what I mean. We do these iterative updates on K2.
And who's your competitors in the space?
It varies depending on the space. So, for example, when we do some of the bigger stuff, so kind of little triangles. At the top end of things, we compete with things like Pegasystems, IBM BPM, Oracle BPM, and that sort of stuff. Normally together with Microsoft, we compete with them at that high end. Then we have sort of middle tier where we compete with organizations like quite a few of them have disappeared, like Global 360 and Metastorm. You know those guys. And then there's a little bit of a compete when it comes to kind of the low end around kind of just pure SharePoint-based workflow stuff. And then there's competitors in there like Nintex, for example, Bamboo. There's about 100 that sit at that level from a kind of SharePoint workflow point of view. That make sense? Yeah. So again, I guess where K2 is quite different is that I could go and build you a small little Mickey Mouse process inside a SharePoint that does a little thing like that, and I could do that honestly probably about 5 minutes. Let's go as fast as we can to do that. But on the same platform, you can build an entire enterprise business process that's crossing, the entire organization if you want to as well. And I think that's a little bit of the difference with K2. You can kind of also start off small, and then you can go and do the stuff that you can do with Pega, for example.
Do you have a cloud service as well as, presumably this is on-prem infrastructure?
It can be both. So you can host this on-prem. A lot of customers end up doing that where they've got a lot of on-prem systems that they want to then start to expose in a hybrid scenario. You can also host this inside of Azure infrastructure as well. We do have a SaaS offering for the sort of Office 365 SharePoint sort of stuff that is in the US at the moment. They haven't rolled it out to anyone outside of the US. Thanks for coming. Cool.
So the forms and the workflow, are they also available in other products like CRM or?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. So we've got customers that use Dynamics CRM and K2. So there's a little bit of integration work that you do inside there so for example, K2's got a task list. So what you can do is you can expose the K2 task list inside of CRM. And what some of our customers do is they say, rather let the K2 write it to the CRM queue and then use CRM queues rather than the K2 task list. But you can totally build and interact with Dynamics CRM and K2 all on its own. Cool. Any question?
How are you managing the release? For instance, you want to move from
Yep.
environments.
Yeah. So what K2 has got is package and deployment tooling. So effectively, if I go to that form, for example, and I say I want to deploy this form into another environment, I open up my package and deployment tooling. I click on the form, and I say this form. And then K2 says, hang on a second. It does a little check, and it says, this form is using these two views. Those views are using those smart objects. Those smart objects are using these services, and it builds up an entire representation of actually this is what you need to deploy, not just this form. So it keeps a dependency server on all the kind of intricacies and the stuff that are dependent on each other. And it says, okay, you create a package out of that. Then when you you create one file, so one file package, then you take that package into your next environment, and you say, I want to deploy this package. It then looks at that environment and does a delta check between what's in this package, what's currently on their versions, and it'll start giving you information about, do you want to up that version, that use existing, there's a whole sort of tool to move across like that. And it handles things like, for example, I'll show you a small example here. Here's a workflow process. Okay, so this is an example of a process. So what I might do in this process is say, okay, at this point in time, I want to send out an email. I go next, and you see it says from address. So what we're not doing is I don't hard code the address inside here, because in my dev environment, it's from the dev server or whatever it is. But in production, it needs to come from the fancy company name and all that. So when your package deployment moves across, it picks up those and it says, okay, these are the environmental fields. And then you can set them for each environment, and then you just deploy into the different environments. So they've thought about that. It actually comes out when I was at Microsoft Thames Valley Park. We worked on a project for the UK Ministry of Defence. And we would create an application, and we went through 70 environments before it went into production. So out of that, the pain of, they created this tooling to help us progress that into, and you can script it, you can MSI build it, you can PowerShell it, you can do all that sort of stuff with it. Any other questions? Sure.
With that packaging question, can you just deploy your form? Let's say you make two modifications.
Yeah.
The smart object, say you added a new field.
Yeah.
If you take that example, but you also made a change to the form.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with that field that you added to the smart object, so that's separate. But you've done two changes, but they're two separate changes, and you want to deploy just the form. Can you?
I don't know actually. Come and see me at the Boon. You can, hey? Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.